But let's talk about the 2020 recruiting class. It is done, even adding a kicker late. Look, this is me, Colin. I can't get excited about a kicker, and I surely can't get excited about a kicker the day after signing day, but Cole's kicking camp rates him a 5-star, which is not nothing, right? He's a local kid, which I love, coming out of Bishop McGuinness. If anything, what do you have to say about that?
Well, it's something that I believe has value, obviously. I mean, we've come to learn very quickly, I think, as we've consumed OU football, the importance of special teamers. I mean,
Amen.
Man, I still don't believe that we've given Gabe Burkich enough credit for what he accomplished this past season. By the way, how did Callum Sutherland win that job? Someone explain to me how the heck he ended up kicking the football to begin the season.
Hey, man, like, remember we were having that same conversation about Davis Webb at Texas Tech. Like, how does he beat out Baker Mayfield? You know, it goes how it goes. Like, I'm not going to hold a grudge on that because Gabe was ready, and this game is as much about luck and staying focused on what you can control as much as winning. Like, that I think we don't give him enough credit for because, you know, how many times do we watch kids that we know can play just wilt because circumstances just stack against them? I mean, an example for this for me is Levi Draper. Like, we all think the world of Levi Draper as a player, but because of the injury and because Kenneth Murray Jr. kept getting the snaps, and then you have turnover with the staff, I mean, so many things just did not go Levi's way. Doesn't mean he can't play, and that's what I mean by circumstances. Like, how does Levi Draper not get on the field? Because next year, I expect that kid to have over 100 tackles in the SEC because he's just going to play. That's what it is. So I think you're right to point out we don't give Gabe Burkich enough credit. I would add to that, we don't give him enough credit for just staying ready, man. Just staying ready. And then following through. Didn't miss a kick.
Yes.
Didn't miss a kick.
Man, he is nailing them, and I think you bring up a great point. It's all about circumstances, and circumstances change. Situations are ever evolving, and so adding a guy like Zach Schmidt has validity to it. I mean, you never know what Gabe Burkich is going to be like a year from now.
Right. Sure,
he was nails this season, but man, specialists get so flaky at times, and you've seen that in the past in Oklahoma uniform that you got to have somebody ready. So, no, I think it's a good pickup. And overall, when you mention circumstances change, that's kind of the theme, in my opinion, for this 2020 class. It was a class that added depth. It added some important pieces in positions of need. And I think overall, while it may not have the flash or the pomp of the 2019 group, this is what I've been saying, a class that lays the foundation for sustained success, especially in the trenches. And in my opinion, if you're going to catch up, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, to the SEC, you have to have the dudes down in those trenches to win the battles. And this class does exactly that, in my opinion.
100%. So let's go to that. I'm going to ask you for the player that you like the most to start. Which player in this 2020 class do you like the most?
Oh, it's sneaky. I'm a really, really big fan of Marvin Mims. I got a chance to see him play a ton. I followed him intently through the Texas high school football playoffs. Just for a number of different perspectives, this guy is next level. I'm going to start off the field from a maturity standpoint. He is so incredibly well-spoken and about himself. He went off and essentially saved Frisco Lone Star season in one of the games I attended, and I asked him about it afterwards. And the first thing he talked about was how important the community of Frisco was to him and how much he wanted to uplift their spirits in times of need. Like that's not something you hear a kid of his age talk about. But then you look at what he does on the field. I understand that he's 6 foot, 170 something, and they just brought in an incredible haul of receivers. But Marvin Mims to me is so advanced in terms of high pointing the football and creating space. He's such a smart player on the field that his technicalities outweigh what he may bring from a physicality standpoint, if that makes sense. So I'm a really big fan of Marvin Mims, and knowing the maybe lack of depth that will be necessarily established heading into next season, a guy like him will be heavily leaned upon, in my opinion, because of these various aspects that he brings to the table.
I think that's a solid pick, man. I'd add to that. He's wildly mature. Like, so much so that when I was interviewing him for a feature in December, I said, what do you plan to do after football? Which is a question I give to most of the kids. So now, get a job, move home, start a family. Wasn't even thinking about playing in the NFL. He was thinking about graduating,
Yeah.
and that I love that. And I expect him to play in the NFL, but that's not the point. The point is just his maturity, man. Okay, my favorite is Perion Winfrey. He has the ability to come right in with his size, with his hand fighting skills, and pick up where Neville Gallimore left off and give you a capable running mate with LaRon Stokes and or Jalen Redmond, depending on which group you want to run out there first. I know that Josh Ellison is, for some folks, a favorite. I mean, he had 123 tackles as a defensive tackle in high school in one season. I'm going, how do you even do that? And then you watch the tape and you understand. But Winfrey was a guy that needed to go the junior college route for grades. He got himself correct. He got himself right. And he is overjoyed to be playing football at a place like the University of Oklahoma. He let slip to me that he ended up at Iowa Western in part because Iowa State wanted him to end up there so they could come get him later, right? And then he basically overperformed Iowa State and decided that OU was a place for him to be, and his jersey number is going to be 8. And I love the defensive linemen that wear the single digit, but for this reason, I love him even more. He picked 8 for its biblical meaning, which for those of you that don't know, it has undertones of resurrection and new beginnings. And Winfrey believes that OU is his new beginning, and I'm pulling for him in a big way, and I think he can help you tremendously up front.
I love that pick. And you mentioned the new beginnings. He is going to be such an important piece of this new beginning for the Oklahoma defense, if you will, what Alex Grinch was able to accomplish last season. It was incredible if you really think about the pieces that he had and then taking it to what it became. But Winfrey is certainly a guy that helps you reach the next level. And I'm so excited to see him, what he can provide. You mentioned kind of substituting in for Neville Gallimore, but also who he is just as himself. I mean, everything you hear about him is the high motor, the elite level aggression. That's the presence that Oklahoma fans have been calling for gosh, how many years now? Can he be that guy? I believe that because of the personality traits that you're mentioning, he certainly has the foundation to succeed at a high level. I can't wait to see what he brings to the table. I want to ask you this, though, as we kind of go through as well, RJ, to give you an opportunity to lead into some analysis. We mentioned the guys that we like the most. Who are some guys, maybe one guy that you really firmly believe is a little bit underrated that could surprise at the next level? I recently wrote a piece about this. I'm interested about your take because, in my opinion, there's a really sneaky amount of depth in this class, even though they finish outside the top 10.
And it was a really great piece for those of you that are members. It is VIP, so please get to it. And it was outstanding. I thought you made some really good points. I don't want to steal any, but right now, I thinking about that and thinking about what I believe, man, I love Shane Witter. I just love his at 6 foot, 225, legitimate 4.46 speed. He has played wildcat quarterback. He has played slot receiver. He has played outside receiver. He's played some safety. He's been an edge rusher, but he shines as your inside linebacker and at a position where you're going to need depth. And you need depth not just because, Caleb Kelly or Deshaun White or Brian Asamoah might get hurt, but to sharpen those guys up. I mean, one of the best things to happen to Oklahoma in the 2018 season, as wild as it is to say, is Curtis Bolton beating Caleb Kelly out for that job at will linebacker because they needed him to be the best player on the defense, even as that defense was trash statistically and gave up way more yardage and way more points than they had any right to. Curtis Bolton was really good in it, right? And if you don't have him there to push Caleb Kelly, one, you probably don't get the kind of play that you got out of that position. But two, now you have Caleb Kelly knowing what it takes and competing once again to get back on the field. We know about the ACL injury, and he's slotted right now as the starting will next to the Mike we assume to be Deshaun White. But if Witter and Brendan Walker and those type of guys can come in and push him and push Brian Asamoah and push Brian Meade, you get better as a defense in a hurry.
Man, I agree 100%. And by the way, Curtis Bolton to Shane Witter, I feel like it's such an accurate comparison if you look at the frame, but also what they bring to the table in terms of on-field play. I think it's a spot-on comparison, and he is a really intriguing aspect of this class. One of the few guys that's going to be able to provide some linebacker depth in this class, and linebacker depth is certainly needed. I want to quickly mention the fact that I think we are really high on Noah Renze as a staff, correct? I think he's a stud, but I just don't know that we've talked about this guy enough, especially because, as I mentioned earlier, the wide receiver depth to me is such a big question mark heading into this offseason. What Trayvon West did, RJ, this season, people in the DFW Metroplex were blowing up my line saying, dude, you got to come check this guy out. He doesn't talk once, but his play does enough talking for him. Trayvon West balled out for Arlington Lamar this season. Like, what he did was next level. He averaged over 21 yards per catch, and he's playing against really good competition. So when you look at maybe some underrated factors and maybe key contributors heading into next season, Coach Simmons got to find guys that can step up in place of major losses in that receiving core. And I know that Trayvon West may not be the most heralded of a prospect, but product speaks for itself. And if he's able to carry any of that momentum in the next year, man, he's proven to be a big play commodity. And we know that this big play offense could be even more highlighted with an arm like Spencer Rattler's if he eventually earns that job. And I believe he will. So Trayvon West to me is a guy I don't know that a lot of OU fans have necessarily taken into consideration. But, man, he's another important piece of this class as we head into the 2020 season.
No, it's an outstanding pick, and he was the first wide receiver in. People forget that. And when I say March last year was when he committed. It was pretty quick, and he stayed committed, and there's been nothing to actually get upset about. Or unless you watched him like you did to get excited about it, I would also add to that depth at a position where there just isn't a lot of experience. I know that Obi Obialo is going to take up the slack for Theo Howard, but that still leaves just Jaden Hazelwood, Theo Weiss, and Charleston Rambo, along with Trajan Bridges, as the only guys with college football experience. I know many of us are very high on Drake Stoops, but he's still not on scholarship, even as I think that's going to change. I also just kind of slide in there. You said something that I thought was really important, which is, OU fans didn't really think much about him. They didn't think much about Hollywood Brown when he signed in 2017 either. He was buried on that 2017 class. We didn't think that was going to amount to much, right? And he got just a little bit bigger, but not a whole lot bigger, and he turned out to be the best wide receiver Oklahoma's had, 2017 and 2018? Yeah. So Trayvon West has that potential. So I
agree 100%, man.
I want to flip back to you and ask you, who is the guy that has, I guess Trayvon West kind of answers this question, but who has the most upside? Most upside
to me, I think this is a really interesting pick because that's kind of the clean slate, right? You can pick the high-level guys or the low-level guys. I know Reggie Grimes is incredibly raw, but to me he has a ton of potential. To me, though, the most upside, and in my opinion, that means who is the guy that could be an All-American or a first-round NFL draft pick? I got to go with the in-stater Andrew Raym. I just feel like who he is as a player, he's built to be such a strong contributor for seasons to come and then eventually carry that over to the next level. I went out there. We were working on his whole commitment thing. I've seen him work, and then we obviously kept a really strong track of him as the season went on. I got to go to one of his games, and he really is such a strong talent. I know Lincoln Riley said he thought he was maybe one of the most advanced in-state prospects that he's seen in his time in the state, and I agree. I think Andrew Raym has all the tools to be that next-level guy on the offensive line. So for me, when you're talking just straight-up upside, and I know that he can reach that upside, it's Andrew Raym, no question about it.
I think I would rob our listeners of saying that I would go with Andrew Raym as well, because, that's not the point. But I can't agree more with you because he's also the highest ranked player in this class for OU at number 41. I mean, watching this kid leg out a triple at Broken Arrow last year, going, what? Wait,
Oh man, and as a baseball guy, I
yeah,
love that.
6'5",
dude.
285,
That
you're
was awesome.
legging out stuff. What are you doing? God.
Get in the dirt, big fella.
Yeah, right? You know what I mean? No, it was great. So the guy I think has the most upside is actually Michael Henderson. Just because of his versatility, having played the quarterback position, which I think is wildly underrated when you're asking guys to play other positions, not unlike Braden Willis, who was a late addition to the 2018 class, but has proven to be essential, playing not just on teams, and when I say teams, I mean special teams, but plays some fullback and then some tight end and then back to some fullback. You can do all kinds of different things with him, and if you want to throw some throwback stuff, you can do that with Braden Willis. You can also do that with Michael Henderson. Henderson's also already just a bigger dude at about 6'2", 230, and he's flirted with the idea of playing quarterback in the Big 12. TCU and or Kansas State, we're going to let him try to do that, and he could go to Texas and do something. He could go to Georgia and do something, but he chose to come to Oklahoma where he's going to play that really interesting, I don't want to say essential, but interesting, versatile position that is fullback in Lincoln Riley's system, because we've seen Jeremiah Hall in it. We've seen, of course, Braden Willis in it. We also got to see what Dimitri Flowers made it be, right? And we've been looking for a guy who can make it that once again. I think Michael Henderson gives you that option.
No, I think that's a great point. And he's kind of a guy to me, when you talk about, I'm just going to call it the H-back because of the versatility that you mentioned. Even before Lincoln Riley made that position so important with Dimitri Flowers or Jeremiah Hall or Braden Willis, and I'm high on all of them. Think about like similar guys playing that fullback tight end role in Trey Millard or an Aaron Ripkowski. Like OU has had, actually, if you think about it, a pretty strong reputation for that position. And as a result, it's become impactful in the grand scheme of that strong offense. So when you think about who he is as a player, you mentioned it, good frame, great athleticism, and a very strong understanding of the game because he had to do in high school. He has so much upside going into this season that, yeah, he could certainly factor into that rotation with those two younger guys in Jeremiah Hall and Braden Willis. So I like the pick a lot. I think that down the line, as those three develop, man, Henderson is going to be a mismatch nightmare. And to me, he is a Dimitri Flowers waiting in the wings.
Yeah, it's hard to be an All-American as an H-back or fullback just because you don't get the snaps. But I really love what he could allow for in 2020 and even 2021. I mean, especially in 2021 and 2022. With we expect this OU team to be geared for 2021 more than 2020. But all they've done is go 12-2, 12-2, 12-2 in Riley's first 3 years as head coach. The last question I had for you. My knock on this class, because we talked about it fills gaps, you provide depth. There isn't a can't miss guy in it, right? There's just not. That said, who is outside of Andrew Rame, who is the closest thing to a can't miss guy?
It's a really tough question to ask. In my opinion, the can't miss guy, and I'm going to approach this from a little bit of a different perspective. Okay. I think a lot of people perceive the can't miss guy as like the 5-star, extremely heralded prospect that you just plug anywhere and he succeeds, right? I mean, you have to have those dudes.
Right.
But I also look at a can't miss guy as someone who helps you build the foundation of what you're trying to achieve from a systematic perspective. So as a result, I'm going to look at Bryson Washington because I know that this defense is trying to add speed, length, and overall aggression / passion. Man, Bryson Washington nails all 3 or 4 of those categories. And so if you think about can't miss, you needed a vocal leader, a presence to assemble this defensive recruiting class. And Washington evolved into exactly that. I mean, Lincoln Riley said it in the early signing period. Washington became so impactful in order to assemble these recruits because he was the guy that told everybody, hey, trust in what we're trying to do. Trust in what Alex Grinch is selling. We can do this if we all buy in. So when you think about can't miss guys, you had to have someone who, one, fit your schematic goals, and number 2, eventually helped you build on that goal. And to me, Bryson Washington was that, and he became that once they landed his commitment.
No, that's a great pick. It's an outstanding pick, especially from the standpoint of knowing what you needed at safety after Delarian Turner-Yell went down. I'm not a fan of guys playing out of position like Justin Broyles, who got cooked in the Peach Bowl, but you also saw Grinch, who wanted to throw a bunch of bodies in there on defense, really only threw 2 out there at safety, and that was Pat Fields and Delarian Turner-Yell. So having guys that can actually come in there and help you and sharpen those guys up is important. I'm going to go with Seth McGowan, running back out of Poteet. Just might be the strongest pound-for-pound guy on campus right now as a true freshman. And at the running back position, the way that Oklahoma's been so good at it, I've been looking for the next Samaje Perine. Not Mixon, because Mixon's a different kind of animal altogether. They're coming that big and that fast. Just doesn't usually...
Yeah, that's a dog.
Right. There's a reason why he's 5-star. But in thinking about what Seth McGowan was able to do at Poteet and the way that he can run between the tackles, and he's faster than we give him credit for. It's actually one of the things that he made a point of pointing out to me is, yo, man, I'm fast, and I'm a great catcher of the ball out of the backfield, and he wants it. And more than that, he's the only running back in this class, right? So you really got to love him, because you also gave up recruiting Corey Wren, who ends up signing with Florida State and had 4.3 speed and was also a tremendous catcher of the ball out of the backfield after losing Jace McClellan in the flip to Alabama. So they think the world of him, but when his time comes, I'm not going to be worried about him the way that we were once worried about Kennedy Brooks. We didn't even know if that guy was going to pan out at all, because he just didn't look like what you're used to seeing at OU, and now he's turned out to be your bell cow back, and he and Trey Sermon, I expect, will be your 2 leading rushers next year, with TJ Pledger, we hope, comes on. We like to see Marcus Major for the first time, and then McGowan, if he can push those guys and get run along with Ramondre Stevenson, it's going to be a lot of fun, and we all know that they love to run the football. You know, it's if you're going to give them that option, they're going to take it. Seth McGowan, I think, is the guy that I would expect to compete for time the most on that offensive side of the ball for sure.